In the quiet village of Tulmir, whispers filled the air about a creature that was far from ordinary. To the untrained eye, he looked like any other horse, strong, majestic, and calm. But those who truly knew him, who had seen his eyes, knew there was something far darker beneath the surface. He wasn't just a horse, he was something much more, something ancient, something lost to time, and what he wanted was sinful. It began on a foggy evening when a young boy named Liam found himself drawn to the stables, a place he had always been told to stay away from. But tonight, something called to him, a soft, eerie sound from the depths of the barn. As he stepped closer, his heart raced, his curiosity outweighing the warnings that echoed in his mind. And that's when he saw him. The horse, his name was Caro, stood in the shadows, his dark eyes gleaming with a strange, unsettling intelligence. Liam's father had always said that the horse was cursed, that no one should trust it. But there was something in Caro's gaze, something that seemed to pull at Liam's very soul. As the boy reached out, a whisper danced on the wind, chilling his spine. It was then that Liam understood. This wasn't just a creature of flesh and bone. This was a being of unfulfilled desires, of long-forgotten wishes, and the consequences of giving in to temptation were far more dangerous than anyone could ever imagine. But what was it that Caro wanted? And why did the very mention of his name fill the village with dread? The answers would change everything, if Liam could survive long enough to learn them. Liam couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He backed away from Caro, but the horse's eyes never left him, their piercing gaze following him like a shadow. His pulse quickened as he stumbled out of the barn, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the thick fog creeping through the fields. He knew he should have told his father about what he had seen, but deep down, a part of him felt an overwhelming need to understand Caro's secrets. Something in the horse's presence tugged at him, something that seemed to whisper his name, as if beckoning him to uncover the truth. The villagers had always spoken in hushed tones about Caro, and the more Liam tried to dig into the horse's past, the less he understood. The stories were fragmented, like puzzle pieces scattered across the generations. Some said that Caro had been brought to Tulmir many years ago by a traveling showman, while others whispered that he had arrived from distant lands, carried by a dark wind. No one truly knew his origins, but everyone agreed on one thing. Caro wasn't a creature meant for this world. Liam's father, Arthur, was one of the few who refused to speak about the horse. When Liam pressed him for answers, his father's face would darken, and his voice would drop to a low, almost fearful tone. "You don't need to know about him, Liam. It's better you don't," he'd say, his hands trembling as he worked the fields. But Liam wasn't satisfied with his father's warnings. The more he heard the word curse, the more he wanted to know why it clung to Caro like a shadow. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Liam couldn't resist any longer. He ventured back to the barn, determined to confront the horse and unlock the mystery. But as he approached, a strange chill ran down his spine, and a feeling of dread washed over him. The barn door creaked open, but instead of the familiar scent of hay and dust, a thick, unnatural scent filled the air. Something musty, like ancient wood rotting beneath the surface of the earth. He froze. Inside, the shadows seemed to deepen, and Caro stood waiting, his eyes glowing softly in the dim light. But this time, Liam noticed something different, something that made his heart race. The horse's mane was no longer just black, but streaked with silver, and the faintest shimmer of light danced around his hooves. It was as if the creature was changing before his very eyes. Liam stepped forward, his feet hesitant but drawn by a force he couldn't explain. The whispering wind from earlier seemed to return, curling around him, beckoning him closer. "What do you want from me?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Caro's head tilted ever so slightly, as if understanding, yet not answering. The tension in the air was unbearable, and Liam felt something dark and ancient stirring in the barn. The creature was more than just a horse. He was a gateway to something far greater, far more dangerous. And Liam was standing on the edge, about to learn exactly how deep the darkness went. But before he could take another step, the barn door slammed shut behind him, trapping him inside with only the horse and the chilling, unspoken truth that hung in the air. Liam's breath caught in his throat as the barn door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The heavy silence that followed felt suffocating, and for a moment, he wondered if he had imagined it. But when his eyes locked with Caro's, the reality set in. He was trapped. His heart pounded against his chest, each beat like the ticking of a clock counting down to something inevitable. The horse's presence seemed to grow stronger with every passing second. The air around him crackled with an unsettling energy, and the barn, which once felt like a simple place of shelter, now seemed like a cage, a prison built not of wood and stone, but of forgotten memories and unspoken fears. Liam's skin tingled with the sensation of being watched, not just by Caro, but by something far older, something more powerful that lingered just beyond the edges of his perception. His mind raced, trying to make sense of everything he had learned in the past few days. Caro wasn't just a cursed creature. He was a key to something far darker. But what? And why had his father been so insistent on keeping him away from the horse? The more Liam thought about it, the more he realized his father's fear wasn't just about superstition. It was something much deeper, something tied to their family, to Tolmir itself. The whispering wind returned, growing louder, swirling around him, filling his ears with soft, unintelligible murmurs. Liam's eyes darted around the barn, desperate for an escape. But the walls seemed to close in on him. The only way out was to confront whatever Caro was. But how could he when every instinct screamed for him to run? Suddenly, Caro moved. Not quickly, but with a slow, deliberate grace, each step measured and purposeful. He circled Liam, his hooves striking the wooden floor with an almost hypnotic rhythm. The air grew colder, the shadows in the corners of the barn thickening. It was then that Liam noticed something else. Hidden beneath the surface of the horse's glossy black coat were faint, glowing symbols, like ancient markings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Liam's hands trembled as he reached out, his fingers brushing the edge of one symbol. The moment his skin made contact, a surge of images flashed through his mind. He saw a long-forgotten ritual, a forbidden pact made between the ancestors of Tolmir and an entity that was neither god nor demon, but something in between. The horse, Caro, was part of that pact, a servant to an ancient force that had remained dormant for centuries. And now, it seemed, the force was waking. The vision faded as quickly as it came, leaving Liam breathless and shaken. He stumbled back, his mind reeling with the weight of what he had just witnessed. His heart beat faster now, not just from fear, but from a sudden realization. The curse wasn't just on Caro. It was on the entire village, and it had been waiting for someone to uncover it, to unleash it. Outside the barn, the wind howled, the storm growing stronger. Inside, Caro continued to watch, waiting for something Liam wasn't yet ready to understand. The tension between them grew, the invisible barrier of unspoken history hanging thick in the air. Liam could feel the truth pulling him closer, but the more he reached for it, the further it seemed to slip away. He was running out of time. And then, just as he thought he might finally break free from the grip of fear, a voice, a low, raspy whisper, reached his ears. It wasn't from Caro. It was coming from the shadows, from the very walls of the barn. "You should never have come here." The voice sent a cold wave of terror crashing over Liam. It was faint at first, like a distant murmur in the wind, but then it grew stronger, clearer, and more menacing. His heart hammered in his chest as his eyes darted around the barn, searching for the source of the voice. But the shadows seemed to swallow everything. There was nothing. Nothing except Caro, still standing in the center, his glowing eyes fixed on Liam with an unnerving calm. "You should never have come here," the voice repeated, this time louder, as if it was echoing from within the very walls of the barn itself. Liam's breath came in shallow gasps. He wanted to scream, to run, but his body refused to move. The weight of the words held him in place, as if some invisible force had rooted him to the floor. The barn felt colder, the air thicker, and the silence stretched between them like a taut wire ready to snap. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to escape, but he couldn't look away from Caro. It was as if the horse's eyes were pulling him deeper into something he couldn't understand, something that felt both ancient and alive. His mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of the vision he had seen moments ago. The symbols, the ritual, the pact. Was it possible that the curse was more than just a superstition? That it had been waiting for someone to awaken it? And if so, why now? Why him? The whispering grew louder again, rising like a crescendo in his ears. You can't escape what has already been set in motion. You are the key, Liam, the one who will unlock what has been locked away for centuries. Liam's legs shook, but he forced himself to take a step forward toward Caro. He didn't know why, but something inside him urged him to keep moving. The air around him crackled with electricity, and the shadows seemed to bend and stretch, as if the barn itself was warping under some unseen pressure. Suddenly, Caro let out a low, guttural sound, like a growl, a sound that didn't belong to any horse Liam had ever known. The room seemed to pulse with an energy that vibrated through the floor and into his bones. Liam could feel the presence of something vast, something far beyond the horse standing before him. And then, the barn doors burst open with a violent crash, as if something had shattered the very seal that held them shut. A gust of wind whipped through the barn, carrying with it the scent of rain and earth, but also something else, something rotten, like a decaying force that had been buried for far too long. Liam staggered back, his mind reeling. Caro's gaze shifted. It was subtle, but Liam noticed the change. The horse was no longer just watching him. It was waiting for something, for someone, or perhaps for the moment when all would be revealed. The tension in the air reached a breaking point, and Liam knew that whatever was about to happen, it was inevitable. There was no escaping it now. Whatever truth lay hidden in the shadows of Tulmere, it was coming for him, and the only question left was whether he could survive it. The wind howled through the barn again, louder this time, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The wind howled through the barn once more, and for a moment everything seemed suspended in time. The world outside felt distant, like a place that no longer mattered, while inside the very air crackled with tension. Liam stood frozen, his heart beating wildly in his chest, his eyes locked on Caro. The barn doors had flown open, but the creature before him remained unmoving, like a sentinel waiting for something to unfold. Liam took a shaky step back, his mind whirling. Was the horse the source of the storm outside? Was it somehow connected to the wind, the strange energy that seemed to permeate the air? The whispers continued to swirl around him, almost mocking him, as if they were aware of his confusion and fear. He tried to focus, tried to push through the overwhelming sense of dread, but then, just as his mind started to settle, something shifted. The shadows in the barn began to move, unnaturally, as if they were alive. They stretched and writhed, curling around Caro like dark tendrils, creeping closer to Liam with every passing second. The horse's eyes flashed with a strange intensity, and for the first time, Liam saw something in them that he hadn't noticed before, a glint of recognition, of knowing, something far deeper than the simple gaze of an animal. A loud crash echoed from somewhere behind him, and Liam spun around, his heart nearly stopping. The barn's wooden walls were splintering, cracking open from the inside, as though something enormous was trying to break through. Panic surged through him, and he rushed toward the door, desperate to escape the growing chaos. But as he reached the opening, he stumbled to a halt. Standing in the doorway was a figure, tall, cloaked, and shrouded in darkness. Liam couldn't see their face, but he could feel the presence of something ancient, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. The figure stepped forward, their cloaks swirling around them as if caught in an unseen wind, and their voice, low and cold, cut through the air like a blade. "Do you really think you can escape?" the figure asked, their tone dripping with disdain. Liam's breath caught in his throat. This voice wasn't from the shadows. It wasn't from Caro. It was a voice that resonated deep within him, stirring something primal, something buried in his own memories. The figure's hands, long and pale, reached out and beckoned. "You've already made your choice, Liam. The horse isn't the key, it's you. You've always been the key." Liam's legs felt weak, his knees threatening to buckle beneath him. The figure's words echoed in his mind, their meaning both alien and hauntingly familiar. What was this figure talking about? He had only come to the barn out of curiosity, but now it felt as if his every action had been leading up to this moment, this inevitable confrontation. The figure took another step, and the barn seemed to shake with an otherworldly energy. It's time to remember, Liam. The curse you've heard about, it's not just about Caro, it's about your family. It's about your bloodline. And now it's time to fulfill your part in it. The words hit him like a physical blow, and for the first time, he felt as if the ground beneath his feet was crumbling. His mind flashed back to the stories his father had told him, the ones he had always dismissed as old myths, the strange, whispered tales of an ancient pact made long ago, a deal that had bound his family to something dark, something that had been passed down through generations. But this was something entirely different. The figure wasn't just some part of the legend, it was real. And it was here, in the barn, standing before him. Caro shifted, and Liam's gaze flicked to the horse. The animal's body seemed to shimmer, as if its very form was beginning to unravel, revealing something far more terrifying beneath the surface. What was Caro truly? A creature of darkness, or something even worse? As the figure took another step forward, Liam realized with growing horror that he had no choice but to face the truth of his family's past and the terrible role he was meant to play in it. Liam stood frozen, every fiber of his being screaming to run, yet his feet refused to move. The figure before him stepped closer, the air growing heavier with each motion. As it neared, Liam could see the faintest outline of its face beneath the hood, a face that was both familiar and utterly foreign. It was as if he had seen it in a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. But this was no illusion. The figure was real, and its words echoed in his mind with the force of a revelation. "You've always known, Liam," the figure whispered, its voice carrying a depth of sorrow. "Your family's bloodline has been bound to this curse for generations. It's never been about choice. It's destiny." The weight of the figure's words hit him harder than anything before. The memories of his father's warnings, of the strange occurrences in Tolmere, all came rushing back. It wasn't just a story. It was the truth. His family was tied to something ancient, something that had been buried in the village for centuries. And now, the time had come to face the consequences. The shadows around them thickened, and Liam could feel the barn closing in, its walls pressing against him. But it was then that Caro moved, stepping between Liam and the figure, his dark eyes glowing with a fierce, protective intensity. The horse was not just an agent of darkness. He was a guardian, bound by the same forces that had haunted Liam's family. But something had shifted. The creature no longer seemed like a servant to the curse. In that moment, it felt like a reflection of Liam himself, a being caught between two worlds, struggling to find its place. The figure paused, its hands lowering. "It doesn't have to be this way," it said softly. "You can choose to end this, to break the cycle." Liam's heart raced, his mind spinning with possibilities. He thought of his father's fear, of the villagers' whispers, and the terrible weight of his bloodline. But standing there in the presence of Caro, he realized something crucial. The past didn't have to define him. He could choose his path. With a deep breath, Liam stepped forward. "I choose to end it," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. The figure regarded him with a mix of surprise and sadness, but it didn't move to stop him. Slowly, Caro lowered his head, as if acknowledging Liam's decision. The barn's oppressive air lifted, and for the first time, Liam felt a sense of release. The curse had been lifted, not through force, but through choice. The darkness that had haunted Tolmere for so long began to fade, unraveling like the remnants of a forgotten dream. The wind outside softened, and the heavy weight in the barn dissipated. As Liam walked out of the barn, the dawn was breaking. The world outside felt different, lighter, freer. The burden of his family's past had been lifted, and in its place there was a sense of hope, of possibility. He wasn't defined by the curse. He was free to choose his future. And as he looked back at the barn one last time, he saw Caro standing in the doorway watching him. There was no anger in the horse's eyes, only a quiet understanding, as if the creature knew that the journey was far from over, but the most important step had already been taken. Liam smiled, knowing that he had made his choice, and with that the story of Tolmere and its ancient curse came to an end, at least for him.